In this video, we are going to learn how to take a second derivative of a radical function. The first thing I suggest is to rewrite the function in what we call rational form. So if you have a cube root of x squared plus 125, that is the same as saying x squared plus 125 is raised to the power of 1/3, and I would certainly do that first. So now we're going to start with a first derivative of that function, and in doing so, we're going to have to apply not only the power rule, but the chain rule. So starting with the power rule, we pull the power of 1/3 to the front, we leave what's in the parentheses alone, and then we decrease the power by 1. So when you subtract 1 from 1/3, it's like saying 1/3 minus 3/3. It's going to leave you with a negative 2/3. But remember, with chain rule, you then have to come back and multiply by the derivative of the inside of the function. And so the derivative of x squared would be 2x, and the derivative of the 125 would be a 0. So that would be, and of course, I would go ahead and simplify that first derivative just to make the second derivative easier on the next step. So when I multiply my 1/3 times my 2, that becomes a 2/3. And of course, we'll go ahead and put the x up front with that. And then, of course, we have our parentheses x squared plus the 125 to the power of negative 2/3. So that would be my first derivative. Now, as we approach taking the second derivative, you'll notice that we have a product of terms. I'm going to treat the 2/3 x as one term, and then I'll treat the x squared plus 125 to the negative 2/3 as a second term. So we're going to have to apply the product rule in this case. So we move on to our second derivative. And so with the product rule, it says take the derivative of the first term. So the derivative of this 2/3 x is just 2/3. Multiply it by the second term. So that is times x squared plus 125 to the negative 2/3. And then we add. And so then we leave the first term as is. So 2/3 x is 2/3 x. And then we take the derivative of this second term. So again, using the power rule first, we would pull the negative 2/3 to the front, leave what's in parentheses by itself, subtract 1 off the power, so that's like subtracting another 3/3, so that becomes negative 5/3, and then multiplying by the derivative of the inside, which again is a 2x. I've got a lot of cleaning up to do here. So for now, I'm just going to leave this first set of terms as is. Nothing to really clean up there. And then when I come over here, so first of all, I've got a 2 times a negative 2 times a positive 2, so that'll be a negative 8. And then on bottom, I have a 3 times a 3, so that would give me, I don't know why my eraser turned on. So I had a negative 8, and then on bottom I get a 9. And then I've got an x times an x, so that would be an x squared. And then I have an x squared plus my 125 to the negative 5/3. And I'm assuming that they're going to ask you to simplify that a little bit more, which means you're going to have to factor in order to do that. So you'll notice that we can say that both terms have a factor of 2/3 in common. And then we could say that both terms have a factor of my x squared plus my 125 to the negative 5/3 in common. And so then we put our leftovers with what's inside. And so when I ask myself, what am I going to have to multiply to, end up with this first set of terms, I would need a x squared plus 125 to the 3/3. Okay, I'll write it like that just for now so you can see that Negative 5/3 plus 3/3 would give you the negative 2/3. And then when I factor the 2/3 from the negative 8/9, I would have a minus. So I would need a 4 to get to the 8 on top and a 3 on bottom. And then I would still have the x squared. And then I'm factoring this whole thing out. So, you could say times 1, because basically that whole thing is factored out. All right, so finally I've got my 2/3. And then I have my x squared plus 125 to the negative 5/3. And then since this is like a power of 1, you can take that x squared and you can combine it with the negative 4/3 x squared. And I'm going to just put this in parentheses at this point. And so, so we have this x squared plus 125 minus the 4/3 x squared. And so if you wanted to think of this as 3 over 3 x squared minus 4 over 3, so you're left with negative 1/3 x squared. And then, of course, you still have the plus 125. And that would be your final second derivative.